I've debated sharing this story, but after everything that's occurred since then, I feel I have to warn others. Part 1, When Sleep Becomes Your Enemy. I was in the garage, that Tuesday night. I remember because I had been awake since Sunday, desperation drove me to the garage. Silence was all you could hear. I stood there looking at paint cans and Christmas decorations that would never see another Christmas tree. When I saw my late father's radio buried beneath them, I held my waist, leaned forward and took a deep breath while still looking at the hulking wooden cathedral from 1947, its brass knobs tarnished black and its fabric speaker cloth faded to the color of old bones. The insomnia started after my divorce. Not the gentle kind where you toss and turn for an hour before drifting off. This was the brutal, mind-shredding variety that leaves you staring at ceiling cracks until they start forming patterns that weren't there before. 3 a.m. became my nemesis. That dead hour when the world holds its breath and your thoughts turn against you. I had tried everything medical science could offer. Melatonin that left me groggy but awake. Meditation apps with their annoyingly serene voices telling me to breathe while my heart hammered against my ribs. I even counted sheep like some desperate fool, but the imaginary livestock just reminded me how alone I was in my empty house. Grandfather had been obsessed with that machine. During family visits, I would find him hunched over it at ungodly hours, his weathered fingers dancing across the dials while static whispered secrets only he seemed to understand. He filled notebook after notebook with frequencies and timestamps, cryptic notes written in his spidery handwriting. After the funeral, nobody wanted the radio. Too bulky, too old-fashioned. So it became mine by default. I hauled it upstairs, my back protesting the weight. When I plugged it into the wall, I half expected nothing. These old vacuum tube radios usually died decades ago. But as soon as the power hit, those ancient tubes began to glow like amber eyes opening in the dark. The static that emerged wasn't the harsh white noise of modern electronics. This was something warmer, almost organic. Like the sound of distant rain or whispered conversations in an empty room. The clock on my nightstand read 2:15 a.m. when I began turning the dial. Most stations had surrendered to the night hours ago. I caught fragments floating through the electromagnetic darkness, a trucker somewhere in Nevada complaining about speed traps, an automated weather report predicting storms that felt more like prophecy than meteorology, the ghost of a talk show host discussing government conspiracies with the passion of a true believer. Then, at exactly 2:17, the static parted like a curtain. The voice that emerged made my skin crawl in the most exquisite way. Deep and smooth as aged whiskey, but with something underneath that felt wrong. Good evening, night wanderers. You have discovered WMID, broadcasting live from the spaces between heartbeats, the pause between thoughts. I am your host, speaking to you from the frequencies that exist only when the world isn't listening. My hand froze on the dial. Every instinct screamed at me to turn away, find another station, go back to my sleepless but normal night. But something in that voice held me captive. It was the sound of someone who knew secrets you didn't even know you wanted to learn. Tonight we open our phone lines to those who have seen behind the veil of ordinary existence. Our first caller comes to us from Phoenix, Arizona. Maria, the floor is yours. The woman who came on the line sounded like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her voice carried the brittle edge of someone balanced on the knife's edge of sanity. Thank you for taking my call. I don't know where else to turn. She took a shuddering breath. It's about my neighbor's dog. A beautiful golden retriever named Max. He died 3 weeks ago. I watched them bury him in their backyard, saw the little grave marker they made. But every night since then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., I hear him barking. The rational part of my brain wanted to laugh. Ghost dogs sounded like something from a bad horror movie. But Maria's terror was genuine, raw as an open wound. "Go on," the host encouraged, his voice carrying impossible warmth. When I hear the barking, I look out my bedroom window. And there he is. Standing in their yard, exactly where they buried him. But he's not. Right. His fur looks wet even though it hasn't rained. And his eyes. She choked back a sob. His eyes glow like headlights. He just stands there, staring at my house for exactly 7 minutes. Then he vanishes. Fascinating, the host murmured. Tell me, Maria, have you noticed anything unusual about your neighbors since Max's return? That's just it, I haven't seen them at all. Their newspapers are piling up, their mail is overflowing. But their car is still in the driveway, and lights come on and off at night like someone's home. Ah! The host's voice carried a smile that made my stomach turn. The boundary between life and death grows thin in October, doesn't it? Max isn't haunting you, dear Maria. He's waiting. The faithful always wait for their masters to join them on the other side. Maria's gasp was audible through the radio. You don't think they're? I think you should call the police tomorrow morning. Ask them to do a wellness check. Some reunions happen whether we want them to or not. The line went dead with a click that seemed to echo in my bones. My notebook, I had grabbed one automatically, some part of me already knowing I would need to document this, trembled in my hands as I wrote down everything I had heard. The details were too specific, too disturbing to be fiction. Thank you, Maria, the host continued as if discussing the weather. Now let's hear from David in Minneapolis. David, what brings you to our frequency tonight? The man who came on next sounded exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. This was soul-deep weariness, the kind that comes from seeing too much. I work the graveyard shift at Minneapolis General Hospital. Security guard. Been doing it for 8 years, thought I'd seen everything. He paused, and I could hear him gathering courage. 2 weeks ago, I started seeing a patient in room 237. Elderly man, maybe 75, always wearing a hospital gown. He waves at me when I make my rounds. And the problem, the host prompted, though something in his tone suggested he already knew. Room 237 has been empty for a month. Completely empty. When I check the patient registry, there's no one assigned to that room. But I see him every single night, clear as I'm talking to you now. He looks so real that I wave back sometimes. The temperature in my bedroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Room 237, the host mused. Significant number in hospital folklore. Many people transition in rooms ending in 37. Tell me, David, what happens when you try to enter the room? I tried once. David's voice dropped to a whisper. Used my master key, opened the door. The room was empty, just like the registry said. Standard hospital bed, monitoring equipment, all normal. But the smell. He shuddered. Like flowers at a funeral. Sweet and cloying and wrong. The scent of transition, the host said with evident satisfaction. Your elderly friend is caught between worlds, David. He died in that room, didn't he? But something went wrong with his passing. He's been waiting for someone to acknowledge his presence, to help him complete his journey. But if I acknowledge him, then you become his guide to whatever comes next. Some conversations are worth the risk, David. Harold Winters has been very patient. My pen clattered to the floor. The host had given a name. A specific name that David hadn't mentioned. How did you? David's voice cracked. I never said his name. Names have power, David. Especially the names of those who die with unfinished business. Check your hospital records for Harold Winters. I think you'll find his story quite illuminating. Another deadline. Another impossible conversation that felt more real than anything I had experienced in months. The show continued for nearly 2 hours, and each call was more disturbing than the last. A woman whose reflection had started acting independently, mimicking her movements a split second too late. A man whose dead father kept calling his cell phone, leaving voicemails that consisted only of breathing and the distant sound of dirt hitting wood. A teenager whose drawings were appearing in locations she had never visited, signed with her name in her own handwriting. But what terrified me most wasn't the content of the calls. It was the host's impossible knowledge. He knew details the callers hadn't shared. Addresses, names of family members, intimate secrets that should have been locked away in private hearts. He spoke with the casual confidence of someone reading from a script, except the script was written in the listener's own blood. As 4 a.m. approached, the host's voice shifted. The honey smoothness developed an edge, like silk wrapped around a razor blade. Time grows short, fellow travelers in the dark. Dawn approaches, and with it, the return of the ordinary world that blinds us to deeper truths. But before we fade back into the static, I want to share something with those brave enough to seek out our frequency. I leaned closer to the radio, my heart hammering. Reality is not the solid thing you believe it to be. Every choice you make creates ripples that echo through dimensions of possibility. Some of you listening tonight are experiencing just one thread of your existence. Others are catching glimpses of the alternates, the might-have-beens that exist in parallel to your waking life. The silence stretched until I wondered if the signal had died. Sweet dreams to all you night wanderers who found us in the darkness. Remember, we broadcast from the frequencies that exist only when the rational world isn't listening. Tomorrow night, we'll be here again, speaking truths that daylight makes you forget. The static returned, then faded to nothing. I sat in my darkened bedroom, staring at the radio's dying amber glow, my notebook filled with impossible conversations. Part of me wanted to dismiss it all as an elaborate hoax. Late-night performance art designed to disturb insomniacs like me. But the details were too specific, too verifiable. Maria's story about her neighbors would either prove true or false. David's hospital records would either contain Harold Winters or they wouldn't. I should have put the radio away then. Should have returned to my normal, sleepless nights and left whatever I had discovered alone. But 24 hours later, I was back in my chair at 2 a.m., waiting for that voice to emerge from the static. Because deep down, in the part of my mind that never fully trusted the daylight world, I knew I had found something real. Something that had been waiting for me to discover it. And it knew I was listening. Part 2, The Addiction of Truth. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I researched the stories I had heard. A quick search for Phoenix neighbors found dead yielded nothing current. But I bookmarked the page, planning to check again later. The Minneapolis General Hospital directory was publicly available online. I searched for Harold Winters in their obituaries and memorial pages. My hands shook when I found him. Harold Eugene Winters, age 74, died during routine gallbladder surgery at Minneapolis General on March 15. Room 237. The brief obituary mentioned no surviving family, and noted that Mr. Winters had been a patient advocate who had filed several complaints about hospital safety protocols in the months before his death. The host had been right. Completely, impossibly right. That afternoon, a small news item appeared in the Phoenix Tribune online edition. Elderly couple found dead in Central Phoenix home. The article was brief. Neighbors had reported concerns after newspapers and mail piled up. Police discovered the bodies of Robert and Linda Chen, both 78, in their home. Preliminary investigation suggested carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace. They were survived by their beloved golden retriever, Max, who had been buried in the backyard 3 weeks earlier after being struck by a car. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Every detail matched Maria's call perfectly. The timeline, the location, even the dog's name and cause of death. The radio show wasn't fiction. It was prophecy. For 3 weeks, I lived for those 2 hours between 2 and 4 a.m. Every morning I would fact-check the previous night's callers, and every morning I found evidence that their impossible stories were true. Missing persons reports that matched descriptions of the imaginary people callers had been seeing. Historical records that confirmed the details shared by supposedly fictitious characters. Police reports that validated the impossible events described over WMID's mysterious frequency. I started keeping detailed notes, cross-referencing everything. My dining room table became a conspiracy theorist's dream, covered with printouts, newspaper clippings, and notebooks filled with my increasingly frantic handwriting. I had stumbled onto something that violated everything I understood about reality, and I couldn't let it go. But the more I listened, the more I noticed the host speaking directly to me. It started with general comments. References to devoted listeners and faithful documentarians. Mentions of someone who was getting closer to the truth with each passing night. At first, I thought he was speaking to his entire audience. But the details became too specific to ignore. Our friend with the cluttered dining room is doing excellent work, he said during a particularly quiet moment between calls. Though I wonder if he realizes how much his grandfather would approve of his dedication. My pen froze. The dining room was cluttered with my research. My grandfather had been obsessed with his radio. The host was talking about me. Specifically about me. Keep listening, my diligent friend. You're closer to understanding than you realize. I wanted to call in, to demand answers to the questions that were driving me toward madness. The number was always the same, 555 VOID, and I had memorized it like a prayer. But something held me back. A growing certainty that calling would fundamentally change everything, cross a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. The breaking point came on a Thursday night 3 weeks into my obsession. The show had been particularly disturbing. A woman called about her 5-year-old daughter's imaginary friend, except the friend was providing accurate historical details about a Civil War battle that had taken place on their property in 1863. A man reported that his deceased wife's favorite restaurant had started charging his credit card again, despite the establishment being demolished 4 years earlier to make room for a shopping center. Then, as the clock approached 4 a.m., the host's voice took on that familiar intimate tone. We have time for one final call tonight. Let's hear from our dedicated listener with the blue bedroom walls and the vintage radio. You're on the air. I hadn't called. I was sitting in my chair, notebook balanced on my lap, pen poised to document whatever came next. But impossibly, my own voice emerged from the radio speakers. Thank you for taking my call, I heard myself say with a confidence I didn't feel. I've been listening for weeks, documenting everything you've shared. But I need to understand. How is this possible? How do you know things about callers that they haven't told you? How do you know things about me? The host's chuckle was warm honey poured over ice. An excellent question, and one that deserves an honest answer. Tell me, what do you remember about last Tuesday night? My voice, that impossible other version of my voice, hesitated. Tuesday I listened to the show, same as always. Took notes, verified the stories afterward. Are you absolutely certain? Think very carefully about Tuesday night. A long pause, then I heard myself gasp. There's nothing there. Tuesday night is completely blank. How can an entire night be missing from my memory? Memory, the host said with evident satisfaction, is far more fluid than most people understand. Every night you tune into our frequency, you make choices. What to believe, what to accept, what to remember. Some versions of yourself make different decisions. Different versions. Oh yes. Right now, in this very moment, there exists a version of you that never found the radio. Another version that listened once and dismissed us as an elaborate hoax. And then there's the fascinating version that called us 3 weeks ago and has been living a completely different existence ever since. My notebook slipped from my trembling fingers. What happened to that version? Why don't you ask him yourself? The static shifted, and another voice joined the conversation. My voice, but transformed. It carried a confidence and knowledge that I had never possessed, tinged with something that might have been regret. Hello, this other me said. I wondered when you would finally piece it together. The room spun around me. I was listening to myself have a conversation with myself through a radio station that existed nowhere and everywhere. This is impossible, I whispered to my empty bedroom. Impossible is just another word for unexplored, the other me replied. 3 weeks ago, I made a choice. I accepted the truth that reality isn't singular, that every decision creates branches in the timeline. The show broadcasts across these branches, connecting versions of people who have learned to listen beyond the narrow frequency of ordinary existence. But which one is real? Which version of me is actually me? The host's laughter filled my room like smoke. All of them, my friend. None of them. Reality is a democracy, and consciousness provides the votes. I don't understand any of this. You will, the confident me said. Because now you face the same choice I faced 3 weeks ago. Continue listening and learn to navigate the spaces between what is and what could be. Or turn off the radio and return to your limited, single timeline existence. What happens if I choose to keep listening? Everything changes. You become unstuck from linear causality, able to experience all the paths your life might have taken. Every decision you didn't make, every opportunity you missed, every love you lost, all of it becomes accessible. And the cost? Static filled the airwaves before the other me answered, his voice heavy with exhaustion. You lose the anchor of singular identity. When you can be anyone you might have been, you risk forgetting who you actually are. The broadcast ended abruptly, leaving me alone with the radio's fading glow and the echo of my own voice discussing impossibilities. I didn't sleep that day. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard different versions of myself discussing choices I couldn't remember making. The notebook filled with impossible conversations sat on my nightstand like evidence of a crime I might have committed in another timeline. But at 2:16 a.m., I was back in my chair, staring at the radio and waiting for answers that might destroy everything I thought I knew about existence. Part 3, The Choice That Changes Everything. The next night's broadcast began differently. Instead of the host's usual smooth introduction, I heard my own voice speaking from the radio before I had even considered calling. Good evening, I said, though I was sitting silently in my chair. Tonight we're broadcasting from the crossroads of possibility. I'm your host, and we have a very special program planned. My blood turned to ice water. The voice coming from the radio was mine, but it carried an authority and knowledge that I had never possessed. This version of me had become the host. Our first guest tonight is calling from a timeline where he made a very different choice 3 weeks ago. Let's hear his story. Another version of my voice came through the speakers, but this one was broken, desperate. "I've been traveling between timelines for 3 weeks now," the desperate me said. "At first, it was incredible. I could access every life I might have lived, experience every choice I had ever wondered about. I visited a timeline where I never got divorced, where my marriage had been perfect and happy. Another where I had become a successful novelist instead of wasting my life in corporate accounting. The freedom was intoxicating. But something went wrong," the host me prompted. "I can't find my way home," the desperate me sobbed. "I've seen hundreds of versions of my life, and I can't remember which one was original. In some timelines, my parents are still alive. In others, they died when I was young. Some versions of me have children, others never married at all. Every reality feels equally real and equally false." The broken version of myself paused, and when he continued, his voice was hollow with exhaustion. "I'm lost in an infinite maze of my own possibilities. I'm forgetting who I really am because I can be anyone I might have been. The person you're talking to right now might not even be the real me. I might be an echo of an echo, a ghost haunting timelines that aren't even mine." "Fascinating," the host me said with cold clinical interest. "And what would you tell our listener who's facing this same choice tonight?" "Don't do it," the desperate me screamed through the radio. "The cost is your entire identity. You become a nomad wandering through infinite versions of yourself, never able to rest in the certainty of who you actually are. I would give anything, everything, to return to my simple, single timeline. But I can't remember which one it was." Silence stretched like a held breath, then another version of my voice joined the conversation. This one bubbled with manic enthusiasm. "Don't listen to him," the excited me said. "I made the same choice 3 weeks ago, and it's been the most incredible experience of my existence. Yes, it's disorienting at first, but once you learn to navigate the streams of possibility, you realize what an amazing gift it is." "Tell us more," the host me encouraged. "I'm living every version of my life simultaneously. I wake up in different timelines each day, experiencing different relationships, different careers, different adventures. Yesterday I was a renowned physicist in Geneva, working on theories that could revolutionize our understanding of reality. Today I'm a lighthouse keeper on the coast of Maine, finding peace in solitude and storms. Tomorrow I might be a father of 3 in suburbia, or a traveling musician performing in coffee shops across Europe. And you have no concerns about losing your original identity. That's the beauty of it, the manic me replied. There was never an original identity to lose. We're all just temporary arrangements of consciousness and memory anyway. This experience has shown me that identity is fluid, changeable, infinite. I'm more myself now than I ever was when I was trapped in a single timeline. 3 versions of myself. 3 radically different outcomes from the same impossible choice. Quite the range of perspectives, the host me observed. But let's hear from someone who chose a different path entirely. A 4th version of my voice joined the broadcast, and this one was different from all the others. Calm, centered, genuinely at peace. "I made a completely different choice," this me said. "After that first night of listening, I turned off the radio and put it away. I decided to return to my normal life and normal insomnia." "And how did that work out?" "At first, I thought I could just forget what I had heard. Go back to my routine, pretend none of it had happened. But the experience had changed something fundamental in how I saw my existence. I realized that even within my single timeline, I wasn't really living. I was just existing, going through the motions of a life I had never actively chosen." "So what did you do?" "I started making changes. Small ones at first. I quit the job that was slowly killing my soul and started freelance writing. I called my brother after 2 years of stubborn silence and rebuilt our relationship. I started saying yes to invitations I would normally decline, took risks I would typically avoid. The peaceful me paused, and I could hear him smiling. The radio show taught me that infinite possibilities exist even within a single timeline. You don't need to jump between realities to explore different versions of yourself. You just need the courage to make different choices in the reality you already inhabit. Any regrets about not choosing the timeline jumping option? None whatsoever. I learned that the grass isn't greener in alternate realities, it's greener wherever you choose to tend it. I'm living my one life with more intention and presence than I ever thought possible. 4 versions of myself. 4 completely different outcomes from the same starting point. Well, the host me said, and I could hear the smile in my own voice, there you have it, listeners. 4 possible futures, all equally valid, all equally real. But remember, dawn approaches, and some choices can only be made in the darkness between worlds. The silence stretched until I realized that all versions of myself were waiting for me to make the call that would determine which future I would inhabit. My hands shook as I dialed 555 VOID. WMID, the host me answered immediately. We've been expecting your call. This is. I began, then stopped. How do you identify yourself when you're talking to yourself? This is the listener who's been documenting everything. Ah, the archivist of impossibilities. Have you reached a decision? I looked around my bedroom, at the notebook filled with verified impossibilities, at the radio glowing like a portal between worlds, at the life I had been living that felt increasingly hollow with each revelation. I need to know something first, I said. Are you real? Is any of this actually happening, or am I having some kind of breakdown? Reality, the host me replied, is whatever creates consequences that matter. But I'll tell you this, the choice you make in the next few minutes will be real regardless of the nature of everything else. What happens if I refuse to choose? What if I just turn off the radio and pretend none of this ever happened? Then you continue exactly as you are, aware that infinite possibilities exist but unable to access them. Haunted by the knowledge of what you could explore but choosing the safety of limitation. Some people call that wisdom. Others call it cowardice. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of infinite possibilities pressing against my consciousness. Every version of myself I had heard was real in some way, living in timelines that branched from this exact moment. I've made my decision, I said finally. And what have you decided? The words emerged from some deep place I didn't know existed within me. I choose to stop listening. But not because I'm afraid of infinite possibilities, because I realize they already exist within my single timeline. I don't need to jump between realities to become someone different. I just need to start making different choices in the reality I already inhabit. The silence that followed felt like the pause between lightning and thunder. Interesting, the host me said finally. Perhaps the wisest choice of all. Reality isn't about the number of timelines you can access, it's about the depth of presence you bring to whatever timeline you're in. Will the frequency still be available if I change my mind? The frequency exists for those who need it, when they need it. But something tells me you won't be needing it anymore. You've learned the real secret, that every moment offers infinite possibilities if you're brave enough to see them. Thank you, I said, though I wasn't sure what I was thanking myself for. No, the host me replied, thank you. It's rare that we witness someone choose growth over escape, reality over fantasy. Sweet dreams, night wanderer. May you find everything you're searching for in the light of day. The line went dead. The static returned briefly, then faded to complete silence. I sat in the darkness for several minutes, then reached over and switched off the radio. The amber glow faded from the tubes, and my room fell into the natural darkness that comes before dawn. That was 3 weeks ago. I kept my promise to myself. The radio remains silent, though I won't lie, the temptation to turn it on hits me every night around 2 a.m. Instead, I've been living the life I glimpsed in that final conversation with myself. I quit my soul-crushing job and started the writing career I had abandoned years ago. I reconnected with friends I had lost to my own stubbornness and pride. I started dating again, took photography classes, booked the trip to Ireland I had been postponing since my 20s. Are there other timelines where I made different choices? Almost certainly. Is there a version of me right now jumping between realities, experiencing every possibility? Maybe. Is another version lost in the infinite maze of his own alternate lives? I hope not, but I'll never know for sure. What I do know is this: I'm living my one life with more intention and awareness than I ever have before. The radio show taught me that the real magic isn't in accessing infinite realities, it's in fully inhabiting the one reality you have. But I kept the radio. Not because I plan to use it, but because it serves as a reminder that mystery still permeates the world. That there are frequencies beyond normal perception, broadcasting truths we're not ready to understand. Sometimes, when insomnia visits me now, I can almost hear that familiar voice drifting through the static of my thoughts. Good evening, night wanderers. And I smile, roll over, and choose to dream about the life I'm actually living. Though I have to admit, there are nights when I wonder what would have happened if I had made a different choice. And on those nights, the radio seems to pulse with just the faintest amber glow, as if the tubes are warming up on their own. But that would be a story from another timeline. Epilogue, a message for the living. If you're listening to this story right now, I want you to understand something important. The radio still sits in my bedroom, still plugged into the wall, still waiting. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the clock strikes 2:17 a.m. and the world holds its breath between one day and the next, I hear it crackling to life without my touch. That smooth, impossible voice still calls out into the darkness, "Good evening, night wanderers. You've found your way to WMID." But I don't listen anymore. I don't listen because I already made my choice, and I'm living with the consequences of that choice every single day. At least, that's what I tell myself. But here's the thing that keeps me awake some nights. What if the version of me telling you this story isn't the one who turned off the radio? What if I'm the version who kept listening, who learned to jump between timelines, and this story is just another possibility I'm experiencing? What if you, right now, listening to these words, are about to discover your own mysterious frequency, your own impossible choice? What if the real reason I'm sharing this story is to prepare you for what you're about to find? Pay attention to the static between stations, especially in those dead hours before dawn. And if you ever hear a voice that's promising you access to all the lives you might have lived, well, that's your choice to make. Sweet dreams, night wanderers. The frequency is always there, waiting for those brave enough to find it.
So, if you like this story, be ready for our next scary story, the phone call that saved a girl's life.
The end.